The last 10 years there has been no progress.
You can change things massively on the ground with will and resource.
Also like ruffling feathers, I'm a show off.
This is Yardley in Birmingham, the constituency of Labour MP Jess Phillips. She's known for campaigning against domestic abuse and violence against women, and for always speaking her mind. She's a proud Brummie and grew up in nearby Kings Heath.
Hello.
Hiya, Jess.
Nice
to meet you. And thanks for showing me around your
my
home,
neighbourhood. Yeah, my neighbourhood. Yeah, it's my mum and a group of other women from the local Labour Party, largely. They set up basically a playgroup here as informalised childcare because there was no childcare.
Yeah.
Back, in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, there was no free childcare, and the women wanted to work, so they set up a cooperative where women each took it into, it would never pass Ofsted, like one woman looking after, or two women looking after like 80 kids, so that the other women could go out and work. So they basically sort of invented childcare, a childcare system. But yeah, it was like a women's collective in the area where we all organised it so that women could work. And that's where my politics comes from, I suppose. It's not that the idea of sort of lofty changing the law is one thing, but it's like if something doesn't exist that people need, the women's movement created it and then went on to fight for it to become something that everybody could have. And that is the politics that I like, the bit that actually serves people. So much of what you do there doesn't actually serve anyone, and this served people.
What would have happened then if this playgroup wasn't created by a mum, for those women, for those families?
Well, my family, my entire family, and the security that we had came about because my mum was able to work. So when I was born, I was the last of 4 children, and my mum hadn't worked. My mum, who was a clever kid from working class home, she'd gone to university and she had her first baby at 22, and she didn't work until I was born when she was 33. And it was because of this that then my mum went and she became like one of the most senior, in the sort of civil service world, in the Department of Health. And it was entirely because of this. Yeah. And so I grew up, unlike my brothers, when I was a kid, I grew up with the idea that women went out to work and that they were the security behind their family, not a man. My dad actually did all the cooking, all the cleaning and everything, because my dad was a teacher, so that he was there in the holidays, and my mum was away. She was getting on the train to London at 6 a.m. in the morning, and I can track it all back to the fact that these women bothered to help her and that they helped each other. And my life was completely different to my brother's because I had that. And when you grow up with that, then you think it's okay to get on a train at 6 a.m. in the morning to go to London and leave your kids.
Jess Phillips remains close to her local community. Her politics are rooted in what matters to real people, and she spends as much time as possible in Birmingham.
I'm married to a man from the same place I was born. I live 5 streets away. My dad still lives in the house my parents lived in when I was a kid, where I lived. It's hard not to stick to your roots when you are literally still with them. And most of my best friends live within literally 3 minutes walk from my house. It matters to me to be of this place, and it keeps me grounded. It definitely, and you go to a lot of fancy things in politics, and Westminster it's a palace, isn't it? We forget that because often there's urine pouring out of the toilets from upstairs and it's falling down. You forget that it's a palace, and then you see it through the eyes of people who've never been there, and you remember that it is different. It is a historic place.
Do you like ruffling feathers?
The thing is, I have no radar for what will ruffle feathers. You'll say something and then you'll be trending for ages, and you think, I had no, this? And sometimes I'll say things and I think, oh, here we go, and I'll think I'll be brave and I'll say it, and then nothing.
Yeah.
So I have no radar for it. But yeah, of course I like ruffling feathers. I'm a show off.
Yeah.
Like, that's the reality, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I've been a show-off my entire life. That's, of course, what I don't do is say things just to ruffle feathers. Like, that, only, say things that need to be said, or if they're funny. That's a reason to say something, because it's funny. And actually, I don't think humour in politics, often they don't meet. But I don't think people understand that the quickest way into someone's heart emotionally is to make them laugh, because it's something you share with them. It's literally the shortcut into making somebody trust you is if you make them laugh. So I will say things just because they're funny sometimes.
To get people on side.
Yeah. And it's not even just to get people on side, it's also because I'm a show-off.
Fair.
Rishi Sunak and most of the cabinet, they don't actually live either in the places that they represent, or they don't live the average life of a person in the UK. And so then the worst thing about it is the sort of gaslighting, is that because you've been sat in an A&E for 17 hours with your elderly father, so you're there, and then you go into the Commons the next day and they're telling you you've never had it so good, and I start to feel like I'm going mad. And it's no wonder then that it gets a bit febrile, because when you can't get across to somebody the reality, people, like, the natural human thing is to be like, stop saying that, stop saying it's good when it's not good.
What will be the answer then? Because it feels to me, certainly, like we're in, I don't know, it's going to take at least a decade to try and
100%,
fix things, right?
It's going to take at least a decade to get back to square one. It's going to take a decade to get back to the point where you go to A&E and within 5 hours you've come out and been treated. That's going to take a decade, let alone the progress that you would hope to make. It's the price of progress. The last 10 years there has been no progress. And that's what feels a bit tragic about it, is that if I think of 97, if I think of the 1970s, if I think of 1945, there was, even though things were tough, certainly in 1945, there was an opportunity for progress. At the moment, it feels as if it is just literally tidying up, cleaning up. But that's okay, it's classic women's work, innit? We'll clean it up.
Jess maintains a high-profile public presence in her constituency, despite the murder of 2 fellow MPs, her close friend Jo Cox and the Conservative MP Sir David Amess. Like so many MPs, she's no stranger to personal attacks.
The very worst is like sort of violent threats online, whether that's... Actually, it's more likely, funnily enough, nowadays. Originally, it used to come through social media, but there has been quite a change over the sort of last decade in people being charged for that sort of thing. So it's much more likely usually actually to come via email, very violent and aggressive threats and harassment. And so when I say harassment, I think people think it's like people bothering their MP and that we should just tolerate it. So, for example, one of the restraining orders that I have is from somebody who sent me, I think it was 260 violent and racist emails about how I was basically part of grooming gangs, which is bizarre. 260 emails in an hour. So, when somebody is that frenzied, that is when it will alarm you, to the point that somebody is obsessive about you. He went to prison. So that's the sort of worst end. Trolling, I mean, if anything has got worse of late, I would say that certainly on Twitter or X or whatever the hell we call it now, it just sort of rabidly either right-wing or just anti-woman, misogynistic. And the reason that I think I get more of it than others is that I speak from a feminist perspective. One of the major sort of campaigns that I work on is improving how the courts in our land deal with violent men, specifically violent fathers in the family court. That causes me quite a lot of heat. A huge amount of heat, in fact. And yeah, I think that left-wing women are usually the main targets, but just being a woman and one who isn't scared, they have to try and control you through that. But I've studied violence against women and girls long enough to know that the first thing they have to do to break you is isolate you. And so if they troll me, people stop talking to me because they troll the people who talk to me. And then so first of all you have to isolate, then you have to make people believe the negativity. So it's just paint by numbers really. But my level of resilience comes from years and years of working in an environment where I have to risk assess things all the time. The certainty that stopping doing it wouldn't make it better. That's the fundamental is, if I stopped because I couldn't tolerate the trolling or the violence or the aggression, my children wouldn't be growing up in a safer place. I'm not saying that, you know, me being here will stop it, will make it any more safe, but it definitely makes it less if people like me give up. I sort of loathe the idea that people think that I have a safe seat. My seat has only been Labour for 9 years, the 9 years that I have had it. It's actually quite tense here at the moment. Do I think the Tories are going to win? I mean, I wouldn't stake a quid on it, let alone my house. It would be a quid wasted, wouldn't it? I don't think that the Conservatives could possibly win the next election. It looks at the moment like the Labour Party will absolutely romp home. However, I have been taking part in elections all of my life. Every single general election that I have lived through. And yeah, we've only ever won 3 of them in my lifetime, and that was under one leader. So the Labour Party has an extra special skill for losing elections. So I'm in no way complacent. I'm not just saying that because that's the thing to say. Is that before I was a bit like, oh, it's going to be fine here, until this week, and now I'm starting to get candidate's disease. And candidate's disease is to assume you're going to lose at all times.
Few would bet against this straight-talking MP increasing her majority in the next election.